Okay, well, welcome back, everyone. So you should see my screen, and I started the record. Of course, I didn't record the people taking the test, so we'll start from here and get this party started. Woohoo! Well, you survived your first Shablousky test. Again, it was a little shorter than it normally would have been. It would have been 40 questions, but since we didn't finish that one section, that took up 12 questions. So it's to your advantage that it was a little bit shorter. If you are doing the extra credit that counts towards the first test, that would be due before the second test. So you have until next Tuesday before the start of class to email that to me. Again, it's your choice. You can do 5, you can do 4, you can do 1, you could do none. It's up to you. So they're easy to watch TED Talks, and you're just telling me about something you learned from the TED Talks. They're all people that are connected to the field of psychology in some way. Some of them will actually be talking about in class as part of our normal lectures. So our goal tonight, we're going to cover learning and memory, because that's the 2 topics that are on next week's test. And then the following week, when we do intelligence, again, there'll be the test first, just like we did this time. I'm on Zoom no later than 10 after 4. Like, some people came on early today and took the test. That's fine. You are more than welcome to come on early if you think you're going to need additional time. And then it'll be the same way. You may have a little bit more time because there'll be a few more questions. But, it's basically going to be the same format. And the extra credit on that test will be something we'll be doing tonight as part of the memory section. So it's nothing you can look up. It's going to be something you'll have to pay attention to. Again, this is being recorded, so I will upload this to YouTube tomorrow, and then I will send you the link as an announcement, and then I'll also post it to Blackboard under documents. So let's get started. Oh, and by the way, I will have your test graded before next week. And what I typically do is I send you an email back that gives you your grade. So you know what your grade was on the test. It isn't until after I grade the test that I add the extra credit points. So if you get a response from me saying I got your extra credit, unless there was something wrong with your extra credit, you're going to get that 15 percentage points added to your grade. And if there was something wrong, I will tell you. But other than that, it's pretty straightforward. If you did the extra credit, you'll get the points. Okay, kind of hard to get it wrong, so it's to your advantage to do it. So let's talk about learning, because that's what we're doing right now, isn't it? So when we talk about learning, standard definition: a relatively permanent change of behavior that results from experience. Keywords there: relatively permanent change that results from experience. So pretty much everything you do in some form in your life can be a type of learning. If it's something that you've witnessed, experienced, it's going to be part of your repertoire. So we're learning all the time. We don't stop learning until we die. So what we learn and how we learn it is different for each individual person. Sometimes we learn things so well that they become a habit. So when we talk about habituation, that's learning that occurs because we've been repeatedly exposed to some stimulus, something, to the point that it actually decreases our responsiveness to that stimulus. So let me put that in English. Because you do something so often, your brain actually doesn't pay attention anymore. Have you ever gone, driving, and let's say to go home at the light, you always have to turn right to go to your house. But that night, you're like, "Ugh, before I go home, I have to go to the grocery store," which would mean you would have to go straight. But for so many years, you turn right at the light. Guess what you do? You turn right at the light, even though in your head you were saying, "Oh, I wanted to go to the grocery store." And you realize it afterwards, like, "Oh, why did I turn?" That's habituation. Maybe you bite your nails, don't even realize it till you're actually getting in there and your cuticles are bleeding. Maybe you smoke when you're having, a beer, or, when you're out with a certain group of friends or in a particular environment. Don't even realize it. Maybe you chew on your pencil, or maybe you pop your gum. You don't even pay attention to it because you're so used to that stimulus that our awareness of it is completely gone. So, tonight we're going to talk about really four types of learning, but in reality, it's mainly two types: classical conditioning and operant conditioning. And why I say it's mainly two, because this last thing on cognitive and social learning is one slide out of this whole PowerPoint, because we're going to do an entire section on social psychology, which is that social learning theory. And part of that is the cognitive theory. So, since we're going to spend a whole night on it, we're going to just give you a brief overview, acknowledging that these are other types of learning. But basically, it's these two types of learning we're going to talk about tonight. So, let's talk about this for a minute. Anybody in here ever go to the dentist and you don't like the dentist, and you're not quite sure why you don't like the dentist, but because of maybe a smell or a sound in the dentist, like the drill, you start to get sweaty palms. This is even before you're in the little room or you even see the dentist. How about you've walked down the hallway, and even though you may not know someone, someone smiles at you. What do? You automatically smile back. Or maybe even this one you've experienced. You're in Giant Eagle and you're standing in line and somebody waves at you and you wave back just automatically, even though you don't know who the heck they are. And it actually turns out they're waving to the person behind you. And you're like, "Oh boy, do I feel stupid." But we did that automatically without even thinking, because we've been conditioned. When you go into a traditional classroom, all the desks typically are facing in one direction towards the front. But did any instructor ever say to you specifically that you can't turn your chair around, or you can't sit on the floor, or you can't lie on the floor? Probably not. Now, if you did it, they may make a comment, but nobody actually tells you that when you walk in that classroom. We automatically sit down and face the front of the room, because we've been conditioned over the years of being in a classroom that that's what you do. How about this one? This is always a good one, and feel free to share. We'll just take a couple of them, but it's okay to share. We're all friends here now, okay? Um, is there some food or drink that you can no longer eat or even be around because for some reason you had a bad experience with it? Anybody want to share? Usually I got at least a couple people that have had some good food or drink stories.
I have one to share.
Okay.
I know it sounds weird being, if we're an adult, but I can't do the smell or taste of mint. So when you were doing the example of brushing your teeth, I had a bad experience at the dentist, so I have to get special orders of toothpaste that I get the proper cleaning, because that experience at the dentist as a child and the smell of mint just freaks me out. So when I smell someone like walking by chewing gum, it just brings back those memories.
Okay. Is it all types of mint, like peppermint, spearmint,
Yeah.
or is it specific?
No, it's just all mint.
All types. That's an excellent one. Anybody else? Thank you for being brave.
Mushrooms.
Mushrooms. Okay. What happened when you had mushrooms?
I had a reaction and I had to go to the hospital. It was a very unpleasant one, and it's just the smell of them. They're just nasty, and they make me really very sick.
Okay. Even just looking at them, does it make you nauseous or make you feel uneasy? Easy?
So I don't know. They did a test on me one time at work, them jerks, and we all had pizza in our shop, and one of the pieces or one of the pies boxes was unmarked. It just thought it had pepperoni in it, but somebody gave it to me. I was starving hungry and I scarfed it down, not even paying attention. And 15 minutes later, I was in Presby Hospital.
Yep.
So it was
nasty friends you have there. and anybody else?
Chicken nuggets.
Oh, what happened with the chicken nuggets?
I used to love chicken nuggets until the day I watched a couple of videos how they actually made. Now I don't know if it's true or false, but I've seen like they ground a bunch of little ducky. I don't know if it's true, but since that day, I just hate eating chicken nuggets. I don't like it no more.
Anybody else? I usually get one person who had a bad alcohol experience.
Raisins.
Raisins. Oh, what happened to raisins?
I don't really have much of a story, but when I was younger at my babysitter's house, for whatever reason, she'd always have me like eat them as a snack, and I never liked them. So the older I got, I never ate them, and probably haven't eaten them for a while. I hate the smell and hate the taste.
Will you eat grapes?
Yeah, I love grapes, but I just hate the raisins. I don't know why, but like, I don't know.
Some connection to that. Sure. Anybody else?
When I was in middle school, I was homesick with the stomach flu, and I was watching television, and for whatever reason, Nickelodeon decided to run the same Cheetos commercial over and over and over again. And by the time I went back to school, I still I can't do Cheetos I didn't eat them. I just saw the commercial too many times, nauseous. That was it.
Yeah, you don't even have to eat the thing if it makes a strong enough emotional connection. Mine was chicken pot pies. When I first started teaching, I was also like the cheerleading coach, so I had to go to every basketball game, and I wouldn't get to come home to eat until after the basketball game. So it'd be like all day, be 10 o'clock at night. So I threw in one of those chicken pot pies, the cheapy ones that were like 99 cents. And at the same time, I didn't realize I was actually coming down with pneumonia. and I had never been that sick in my life. But as soon as I ate that chicken pot pie, like within 15 minutes, I was paying homage to the porcelain god all night long, sick as a dog. That was when I was 22. Now I'm 62 now. It wasn't until I was 55 that I forced myself to eat a chicken pot pie. I made sure it was a good one at least. And I haven't had one since, but I knew psychologically what I did. And it was that classical conditioning, that connection. These are how phobias are formed, which phobias, as I said before, are an excellent topic for the paper. Do you have a question, dear? You have to turn your mic on. We can't hear you.
I got it.
There
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, that's like you were saying about the alcohol. When I was growing up, my mom was an alcoholic. People don't understand why I don't want to drink much. I got tired of smelling it. I got tired of looking at it. By the time I was an adult, for the first few years of my life, from about 14 to maybe about 20, I was an alcoholic because that's what I had learned at home. It was a learned behavior. I had watched it go on. I thought it was the right way to go. By the time I was in my early 20s, I just completely stopped drinking and didn't want to have anything to do with a drink. And I'm sort of the same way now. I run from the drink. I had trauma associated with it.
Yeah, the stronger the emotional connection to that conditioning, the longer that connection's going to last. And we're going to talk about some differences between ones that are kind of biological that you could figure out why versus like being afraid of cotton balls or being afraid of walking over a piece of wood. Something had to happen somewhere along the line. And if it was a strong enough connection, then that fear is developed. And to other people, it may seem like, what do you mean you're crazy? But no, that person who has that fear is truly fearful because that conditioning took place. Now, psychologists can desensitize people to their fears. Not everyone can get rid of them because they have to work with the process. And sometimes it can be pretty quick and sometimes it can be a really, really long time. But if you can at least remember where the connection took place, it's helpful to desensitize someone. So I had a student who told me one time that they watched their mom fall down the steps when they were a young child. So she was deathly afraid of steps. Now you can understand that. You're a young child and your mom is laying at the bottom of the steps and you're the only person in the house and there's your mom at the bottom of the steps bleeding. You can understand that's a very, strong connection. So it was not unusual that she developed a fear of steps. One time when I was doing the lecture with phobias, I actually had just a little clip art of like a spider on the corner of my slide. And if you see me, she was in the front and when I switched the slide, she was like this. I noticed that right away. We have a whole class, we notice everything because we can see everyone. And I said, you're afraid of spiders. Just, I can't stand it. Well, the first thing I did was take the spider off the slide and never put it back on there because to her, that was terrifying. Everyone else in the class was like, it's a clip art of a spider. But she told the story of when she was a Girl Scout, they went camping and, they're laying outside and everything. And she fell asleep and she kind of slept with her mouth open. You kind of know where this is going. And she felt something funny in her mouth, and this spider had crawled into her mouth. And of course, when she saw it, she, freaked out. I would, and to that end, for the rest of her life, she said, I'll probably be terrified of spiders. It's like, well, you can be desensitized, but that's a pretty strong connection. So some things like nature and, snakes and things like that, maybe dogs, because you got bit by a dog, you can understand. But when you get those unusual things, like say this razor, you just would be terrified if I held this razor up and you went running out of the room. No one would ever think that this could cause such a fear, but it can. Anything can cause fear if that pairing has taken place. So what we're talking about are examples of things that people have been classically conditioned to, and they may not even know why or when it happened. Again, if you can place when it happened, it's a lot easier to get rid of that fear. But if you can't, it's much harder. It's not that it can't be done. It just takes a heck of a lot more work to get it done. Okay, so let me go back to sharing here. Good. Thank you everyone for sharing. I know sometimes it can get scary to say everything in front, of your peers. Same thing, if you walk in your house, and cats aren't known for, running to the door like dogs as much, some do, but some do not. You may not see Fluffy anywhere for hours, but as soon as you go to open Fluffy's food, Fluffy has learned the sound of their food opening. There's Fluffy, just the sound. So even, the different lower forms of animals can be conditioned, not only just us. So when we talk about classical conditioning, the man we're talking about, and we mentioned him in the first lecture, good old Ivan Pavlov. And when you watch the video on learner.org, you will see the experiment of Ivan Pavlov and his dogs. It's just a little clip, but when Pavlov did his experiment, he was not trying to discover classical conditioning. He was doing research on nutrition, which he actually won the Nobel Prize for. And while he was doing his experiment on nutrition, he saw a pattern forming, and he didn't understand it. So, since we're science and we follow the scientific method, Pavlov set up his experiment to test what he thought was his hypothesis of why it was happening. So we're going to talk about classical conditioning. Now, the one nice thing about classical conditioning, no matter where you are in the world and no matter what book you use, they all use the standard abbreviation right here of the unconditioned stimulus is the US, unconditioned stimulus. Unconditioned response is the UR, conditioned stimulus, CS, conditioned response, CR. So no matter where you're at, what book you're using, what edition you're using, it's standardized. Okay, so we're going to talk about these different components, but you should become very familiar with these four terms. Your activity as part of this section, there are classical conditioning examples, like scenarios on Blackboard. We'll do one together so you have an idea. They're a practice for you, but it's also your activity, but they're there. And next week, before the test, like the day before, I will actually put the answers up to it so you'll know the right answers. But there's going to be one of these on your test that's going to be similar. So I just want to make sure you all understand how to do them. So that's why that practice sheet is on Blackboard. And like I said, the answer sheet's not up there yet, but the answer sheet will be up there. I'm just going to give you a couple days to try it yourself before I give you the answers to make sure you're right. And there are hundreds of these online. So if you feel you need to practice more, just type in classical conditioning scenarios and they'll come up and they have the answers. So it's pretty straightforward. So here's Pavlov's experiment. So he was working with dogs and he was measuring how much saliva is produced in order to break down food. Again, he was doing nutrition studies. So here's his setup. The dog has a tube connected to his mouth that's going to collect the saliva that's collected to this large cylinder that's a graduated cylinder that he can record how much saliva has been produced when the dog, is going to eat. Well, what he noticed was at first when he just put the food down, the dog had already salivated just by seeing the food. But an odd occurrence occurred. Even before Pavlov took the food to give to the dog, so the dog didn't even see the food. When the dog saw Pavlov, it started to salivate. Now, seeing Pavlov shouldn't cause a dog to salivate. I mean, Pavlov's not food, but that food was paired with Pavlov so many times that the dog learned. Seeing Pavlov meant that it was going to get food, and therefore the salivation started before the dog even saw the food. So here's the experiment. So we have food, which is what we call the unconditioned stimulus. That means you didn't have to learn this. We are all born knowing we need food. It's the unconditioned stimulus. You didn't have to learn that, okay? The unconditioned response, even to us humans, is salivation. So like if we were all in one room and I brought in a pizza, even if you don't like pizza, the smell of the pizza will cause you to salivate more. Even if you hate pizza, just the smell will trigger extra saliva in your mouth to help for digestion. Okay, that's a reflexive response. That just happens. You didn't have to learn either of those two. Now, if we take a neutral stimulus, that means something that normally would not cause someone to salivate. And in this case, Pavlov used a tuning fork. He also used a bell. He also used a metronome. If I hit a tuning fork, my dog Bentley here is not going to salivate. It's just not something that you typically would salivate to. But if I keep pairing that food with the tuning fork, so I show the food and hit the tuning fork, and I show the food and I hit the tuning fork, and I do them at the same pace, like maybe a second apart, very, very quickly, the dog will pair those two things. So we have the tuning fork and the food closely paired. Typically the tone first, but as long as they're within a couple seconds, it really doesn't matter if it's first or second. in reality. So we're pairing something that never caused it before to now cause the same thing that food would affect. And we call that acquisition. So that would be a vocabulary word you want to know. Acquisition is acquiring a new learning. So you're learning a new pair, two things that are going on together. Eventually, you can take the food away and just go ding with the tuning fork. And guess what? The dog is going to salivate. Ding. And then salivation. That pairing has taken place. This conditioned stimulus is now giving a conditioned response. In this case, salivation. So anything we talked about when people were sharing this story, anything you avoid. Avoidance learning is classical conditioning. Things that have been paired with some negative response. Now, classical conditioning can be positive responses, but not too many people develop phobias for a positive response. You know, we develop a phobia because of its a negative effects, you know, that something is strongly connected to one of those negative emotions. So we're conditioned. And there are literally hundreds of phobias. If you remember the first night, I told you this story about little Albert. So here it is again. So it's fair game for the test. John Watson conditioned little Albert to be deathly afraid of a white rat, where previously, when the white rat was presented, little Albert made no response. But he paired that white rat with the sound of a loud gong. All of a sudden now, little Albert is crying. So the white rat became the conditioned stimulus. It didn't cause any type of response before. Now that it's paired with that loud gong, little Albert cried. And again, when you watch the video on learning on learner.org, you will see this experiment with little Albert. It's much easier to understand the development of a snake door phobia. It is not as easy to understand a car door phobia. So as a reminder, and this is always one I tell this story, it's a good one to remember why some of these are hard to forget. So I had a student who was going out to the bars. She was taking her friend. She was the designated driver. They were going to the South Side, and they went to the South Side, and they were going to all the bars. She was, designated driver, so she didn't drink, and they stayed till close. And if you've ever been in the South Side, there's not a lot of grass. It's a lot of cement. But she parked there, all going in the car. She gets everyone, it's like, okay, we're gonna go. They get to the car, and she goes to open her car door handle, and she reaches in, and some wise ass decided to put fresh, excuse my language, dog shit underneath her car door handle. So when she reached in, it oozed all over her hand. Now, she's like trying to wipe it on cement. Her friends are drunk. They think it's funny as anything. She developed a phobia to car door handles. She cannot open any car doors, any type of car door, without having something on her hand, like a glove, or have a paper towel, or a plastic bag, or something that she doesn't touch the car door handle with her bare hand. That's a pretty strong phobia. And I can, just picture it in my mind. I know I would be pretty disgusted. I'm sure you would be too if that happened. So you can understand that would be a strong emotional response. But it wasn't only her car, it generalized to every single car that she ever goes into. She will not get in a car. She will not open the door if she doesn't have something to put on her hand to open the door. That's one of those strange things that people say, "Well, why are you doing that?" Well, this is why. Now, could that be desensitized? Oh, yes, easily. Do you necessarily want to desensitize that? Well, maybe not, because nobody wants people touching fresh dog manure, but it's a possibility that you might kind of get rid of that phobia on your own. But more than likely, that's going to be a phobia that's going to be around for her for the rest of her life. Okay. Let's go back to. So, some vocabulary words. Now, I want you to pay attention to this chart. So, put a little star. You want to pay attention to this chart. Remember I said always the charts in the PowerPoint are important. So, this is the one you want to pay attention to. If we have acquisition take place, so the conditioned stimulus is paired with the unconditioned stimulus, and now the conditioned stimulus causes the reaction. Eventually, the dog learned, hey, I'm just seeing Pavlov walk in and I didn't get any food. Or with the tuning fork, eventually, if the dog hears the tuning fork and it never gets food again, that behavior is going to be extinguished, and we call that extinction. But there's a period of time, and that period of time can be minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, years. And if just one time that stimulus causes the dog or the person to react the way they did when they were first paired, we call that spontaneous recovery. Okay, it happens after a rest period. There's no set time, but it can occur. So, an example. So, again, sharing a story that one of my students shared. So, it's the day after Halloween, and this family wanted to go to, I think she said it was Walmart, but it could have been Target. I can't remember after all these years. So let's say Walmart. And if her child was good, they would always give them a little treat, like they could pick out their favorite candy at the checkout. Now it's the day after Halloween, so they have this entire bag of candy, at home. So child's very good, and they get to the register, and the little kid is like, "Mom, Dad, can I have that candy bar right there, that one right there?" "No, honey, you can't have that candy bar. You have a whole bag of candy at home. We're not going to buy more candy. You can have a piece of candy when you go home." but I was good. I was good. I want that candy bar. You promised me. We have candy at home. You have an entire bag of candy. Look, when we get home, I'll even let you have 2 pieces of candy instead of 1. But I want that candy bar now. I want it now. And the next thing you know, the kid is like laying on the floor, pounding, screaming, yelling, kicking, having a tantrum. And she did what you should never do. And you'll understand why as soon as I say this. She went, got the candy bar and said, "Here." Yeah, acquisition just took place. That child just learned, hey, if I do this, I get this. Now, if it happens again and they don't do it, it may just become extinguished and go away. And if he tries it a couple times and they don't give him the candy bar, it may go away. But if every time it happens, they get rewarded with what they want, whether it's a candy bar, they get to watch a TV show, they get to have a certain thing in their room, whatever, they've just learned that behavior. So let's say they stop rewarding them. They're like, no, we're going to go out to the car. You're not going to get any candy. And, they may go screaming and yelling, but you don't give them the candy. And eventually the behavior extinguishes. So it's 6 months later and you're back in Walmart again. And the kid's been kind of good. And you extinguish that behavior. And the child was like, Mom, Dad, I was really good. Can I please have that candy bar? Please, 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 please. And they start to show that behavior. And you go, okay, here you go. Spontaneous recovery. It's back. And it will be hard to get rid of the next time. People don't realize how hard it is to be a parent until you're a parent. Because everything you do could condition your child without you even realizing you're conditioning your child. Very common one. Again, is your little one gone so I can say the S word? I don't want to say it if they're there. So one of my friends had a little 2.5-year-old, and her 2.5-year-old would always stay in the kitchen while she was cooking, and she burnt herself, and she said, shit. And her 2.5-year-old said, shit. And she's like, no, 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 no. We don't say those words. Mommy hurt herself. See, she burned herself. She's putting water on it. I shouldn't have said that word. Shit. No, 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 honey. No, don't say that word. It's a bad word. Please don't say that. Shit. I know I said a bad word, but we don't say that word. And mommy will have to take a time out, but shit. Ran around the house. Shit. All over the place. She was in tears. She's calling like, what do I do? I can't get my child to stop saying shit. I'm like, ignore. Don't pay any attention when she says the word, because right now you've paired that word with giving the child attention, which is what the child wants. Stop giving. She said, but what do I said, just ignore it. I said, it may take a couple weeks, but it will stop. And it took about 2 weeks, and it finally stopped. And I said, whatever you do, even if it's like 2-3 weeks from now, If they say the word, you gotta keep ignoring it. Because if you start paying attention to the word again, it could come back. Once they get a little older, you can have the talk of why it's a bad word. But right now, they heard you say it. They want to be like you. They're getting your attention when they're saying that word. You've just conditioned that child to swear using that word. So it can happen. She didn't do it on purpose, but it can happen. So when we talk about classical conditioning, typically it's not done on purpose. It just happens. Whereas when we talk about the other type of learning, operant conditioning, usually that's planned out. We're purposely trying to pair something to get a certain behavior. Sharing this. Now, sometimes stimulus pairings will generalize. As I mentioned with the girl in the car door, she was afraid of all types of car doors, not only hers. Your first love had brown hair. There's a good chance that you will look for people in your future to date that have brown hair first because of that initial pairing. That's stimulus generalization. Or if you have a dog that goes to the window when it hears any car come, not only your car, that's stimulus generalization. Stimulus discrimination would be if the dog hears all those cars and buses, but only goes to the window when they hear the sound of your car. It's very specific. Now, how is all this applied to the real world? You're probably saying. Well, people who have done drugs, you can be conditioned to a certain environment and to have a certain response. So if you go into rehab, one of the first things they'll say is you shouldn't hang out in those places that you did drugs. You shouldn't hang out with those people. You shouldn't go to those same places that you did drugs. Don't put yourself in those situations, because just being in that environment could trigger you to want to do drugs again. Or let's say you're a smoker and every day for a year there was a smoke break at work, and you all went out to the designated smoking spot and you'd stand out there and you'd shoot the breeze and have a couple hits of your cigarette, and would make you feel good, and then you'd go back into work. Well, let's say you're trying to stop smoking because you find out you have asthma or some other lung condition. And what happens? You still want to go out with your friends, but you don't want to smoke, right? Chances are, if you continue to go out with your friends who smoke, you'll be smoking again fairly quickly. It's very hard to be in that same environment and not do the behavior you did before. So if you're trying to quit and you only smoke a certain place, like I always share this story. My boyfriend only smokes at the casino when we go to the casino. Nowhere else. Ever. Nowhere. And that started a few years ago. And he only would smoke when he got a bonus. So if he had a day where he was losing, and he could have a whole pack of cigarettes there, but he would never touch them. If he had a day where he was very, very lucky, he might smoke the whole pack, but never at home, never in his car, never out anywhere else, only at the casino. See, if he would want to stop smoking, then he would either have to go to like a non-smoking section of the casino, or just not go to the casino until he has that connection broken. And even then, there's a possibility if he would go back, he would smoke again. We can desensitize people. You slowly but surely introduce the stimulus to them that they feel comfortable with the stimulus. You don't realize that every single day, every single movie you watch, every TV show, every commercial, you are being conditioned. And when we do social psychology, we're actually going to look at some commercials and show how they are conditioning you, and you don't even realize it. And they start conditioning people very early. One of the more famous ads in uh, media at the time, it was in a magazine, uh, what they kind of call like a subliminal message, was like a winter evening in a fireplace, and there were some comfy chairs, and there was a table, and on the table, I won't say the brand of whiskey, but it was a fairly expensive brand of whiskey bottle that was open there, and there was a glass of whiskey that had 3 ice cubes in it, and the whiskey, and it became one of the top producing sale ads that the company ever did. Do you want to know why? Because the slight shading on those 3 ice cubes spelled out the word sex, S on one E X. But unless you were looking for it, you weren't aware it was there, but your brain saw it. Our brain sees a heck of a lot more than we actually realize. We just choose not to pay attention to it because we have so many stimuluses coming in at the same time. But your brain sees every single thing, even if it's a split second. People saw that word sex, they associated it with that whiskey, and whiskey sales went through the roof for that brand of whiskey. Happens all the time. Why do you think they spend millions of dollars on commercials for the Super Bowl for a little 30-second or 1 minute spot? Because it works. It's basic psychology. We talked about how we can be conditioned to have nausea just by the sound of a you know, a, say a particular bottle opening or a can opening or the smell of something. You know, we can even condition our immune system to fail. And interesting research that shows over 65% of all college students get sick within 2 weeks of their final exam. Yeah, amazing, isn't it? So it may even happen to you. So think about that the next time you're having final exams. You become so revved up. You got to study, you got to study, you got to study. And then the finals are over and you let yourself and your guard down. Well, that whole time you were revving yourself up, all that extra cortisol was being released and it was putting you in stress mode. Now the stress is over, but the cortisol is still in your body and you're still in stress mode, and it's actually damaging your T cells, the blood cells that your immune system that actually fight off illness. So it's amazing how we can be conditioned and not even know. So that's classical conditioning. Operant conditioning. So you would think if a child is having a tantrum and they're punished, you would have fewer tantrums. Not always. Because you have to find out what the child is getting out of it. If the child wants your attention and the tantrum is the only way they're getting it, you're going to have more tantrums. Just like I said with that young kid, little toddler who was saying, the word shit to get his, her mother, excuse me, it was her mother's attention. If you go to the casino and play a slot machine and it pays out, I guarantee you will be back to that casino. And I guarantee you will be playing that slot machine again. It may not hit for a really long time, but you hit big on it and you're going to try it again. You might even try it every single time. Casinos and amusement parks are awesome places to go and see psychology in action. My favorite story from the casino is when, and again, this will help you remember this pairing. This woman, older woman, had pictures of her 7 grandchildren up on the machine. And before she hit the spin button, she would touch each picture and then push the button. And me, the ass that I am, turned to her and I said, let me guess. You hit one time when you did that, right? She goes, yeah, I hit for like $250. I'm like, have you ever hit again? No, but it could happen anytime. So every machine you go to, you take those pictures. Uh-huh. And have you ever hit that big again by touching those pictures? No, but I can't take the chance. She didn't want to hear me tell her about the random generator. She didn't want to hear any of that because she had already made a pairing that if she touches each of those pictures, it increases her chances of winning a lot of money, even though every time she came, it never happened again. It happens. That pairing takes place. And if it would happen a lot, oh, I guarantee she would be doing it all the time, every casino, every day she goes. This is why gambling addiction, good paper topic, happens very quickly. The research actually shows if you hit more than $200 the first time you go gambling, you have a greater percentage of eventually becoming addicted to it. If you lose $200, you may never go back because you've made a pairing. Hey, I lost $200. Well, I don't want to go throw $200 away. I can buy this for $200. But if you win, people go back and they'll go back again and they'll make excuses and it can develop into an addiction or it can just become, a fun thing to do. And when you ask people who are in recovery from gambling, they'll tell you their story and you'll see the pair happening. It's the same thing with drinking. So alcoholism would be a good paper talk. Drug addiction, sex addiction. Okay, these all have connections. People who steal for the fun, they don't need, kleptomaniacs. They don't need the items. They have more than enough money to pay for it, but they steal for the thrill of it. These are all good paper topics that you could choose. Okay. Go back to conditioning. So if you have a dog and you want to train your dog, your dog isn't necessarily, when you first get your dog, going to do what you want them to do. You have to train them, right? Well, you're using operant conditioning. So you want to teach them to sit. So you get this little bone and you say, sit, and you show them the bone and they can smell the bone, and they may need some gentle help, but you kind of lean it over their head, which causes them to lean back and eventually sit on their back legs into a sit. You don't have to push down their behind or anything. But in a relatively short time, you can teach your dog to sit. But to start, you better have those bones because they need some sort of reinforcement. So you reward the dog, there's a greater chance it's going to sit. Now, once it learns that behavior, it doesn't necessarily need rewarded every single time. Every now and then you still need to reward it, but not every single time. Okay? Now, before we get into operant conditioning, which is what we're kind of talking about here, we're going to talk about what's called instrumental conditioning, which is the basis of operant conditioning. And I like to call it the ABCs of Thorndike's law of effect. Notice this is a law, not a theory. There are only 3 laws that we study in this class, and this is one of them. So Thorndike's law of effect. We have a puzzle box there. Notice the cat is inside the box. There's a lever that's connected to a wire that goes on a pulley that's connected to the door. So when the cat presses the lever, it will raise the lever. What's the motivation for the cat? Well, the cat is hungry. What's outside? Oh, a little fish. The cat likes fish, right? You wouldn't put something out there that the cat doesn't like. You wouldn't, put out like mud. That's not going to condition, the cat to want to learn how to open the door. So this is the law of effect, the ABCs. So it's the first letter to help you remember this. Antecedent, behavior, consequences. So for the A, antecedent, that's what's the situation at the beginning. So everything I just described was the antecedent. Now, cats don't just go around pushing little levers. They have to learn it. They can learn it through just finding out on their own. They don't have to be taught it. They can run into the lever and notice that, oh, hey, the door's opening. Hey, I can get out and get that fish. So antecedent is the environment. Behavior is what the cat is going to do. So if the cat pushes the lever, the consequences are the door comes up and it gets the fish and it's hungry. That's the law of effect for instrumental conditioning. Well, instrumental conditioning is the basis of operant conditioning.
Professor,
yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you go back over what you just said on antecedent and behavior?
Sure. So the antecedent is the environment. whatever the situation is. And in this particular case, it's the puzzle box with a lever in it that connects to the door. And if you push the lever, the door will open. And there's a fish out there. So that's to motivate the cat to learn to push the lever. It doesn't necessarily push the lever right away because it doesn't necessarily know to do that. But if enough times it goes over and accidentally bumps the lever and notices that the door goes up, the cat's going to learn fairly quickly, hey, something is happening with this piece of metal here. If I push it, I can go get food. So that setup is the antecedent. The behavior is what the cat or whatever animal, including humans, do. Okay, so it's going to be based on what the environment, the setup is. And then the consequences are what's the reward for doing the behavior. So in this case, for the cat, it got the fish and it was hungry. So it was worth doing the thing. If there was something out there that the cat didn't want and the cat happened to like the box, they wouldn't be motivated to try to get out of the box. So when we say the law of effect is the ABCs, it's the antecedent. So you got to look at the environment, you got to look at the behavior that occurs and what the consequences are. And, you know, as I mentioned, sometimes you think one thing, but it's not necessarily obvious the same way. And I'll give a couple more examples as we go into the operant conditioning. But for this, you just need to know that this is instrumental conditioning. Thorndike's the guy who found it, and his law of effect. Okay, does that help?
Yes, ma'am. Thanks.
No problem. So this is Skinner, B.F. Skinner. We talked about him the first night also. B.F. Skinner and his Skinner box. And this is a Skinner box. And Skinner worked mainly with rats and pigeons. And he taught rats to push a lever, push a bar to receive food. And again, that's not something a rat naturally does. They have to learn that this bar means they're going to get food. So first you have to start off with a rat that's hungry. So if you're going to use food as a reward, don't feed the rat until after you do the experiment. So if you normally feed the rat at 8, do the experiment at 8 and feed the rat at 9. Because you want the food to be a reinforcer to help the rat want to do something. So as the rat would come close to the bar, wouldn't even have to touch it, just come close, you would manually drop a piece of food in this little tray. And the rat would kind of smell it and eventually go over and eat it. But still maybe not made the connection between, hey, I push this bar, I get this food. You may have to do it a number of times to get your rat to do that. Eventually, you only give food if the rat touches the bar. And then eventually, you only give food if the rat pushes the bar down, and then the rat would be feeding itself. And you would see a rat very quickly push the bar, go over, get food, go back to the bar, push the bar, go over and over and over again until all the food was gone. You can train rats using a Skinner box to do almost anything. I had Rat Lab. That was actually part of a psychology course that I had. We all got our own rat, and we had to teach our rats to do something unusual that a rat wouldn't do. I taught my rat to dance by using a Skinner box. You can teach rats, dogs, birds. Skinner used pigeons a lot. But you can also condition people, including your loved ones, including yourself. So we can be conditioned, and you can be the person who conditions someone else. So if you've always wanted that person in your house to either put the toilet seat up or down, after tonight's lecture, you'll know how to do it because you can condition them as long as you know the reinforcement that would work for them, because that's the key. What is it that they want? It's the same thing for yourself. If you want to change some behavior you have to figure out, what are you getting out of that thing you want to change, that you keep doing it? You're being rewarded in some way. If you can find a way to get that reward without doing, say, that bad thing, you can change your behavior. You can condition yourself to do anything, and you can condition most people to do other things. This is a very powerful thing in psychology. If you've ever tried to motivate someone else to do something or motivate yourself, you're probably using operant conditioning. So let's look at the components of operant conditioning.
Can I just say something real quick?
Sure.
When you were talking about the toilet seat going up and down, like make sure you put it down, make sure you put it up.
Mhm.
It made me think, because my boyfriend and I don't live together, but he put new floors. He's doing like renovation on his house. He's a construction worker. It's messy. And I got these floor mats, and I said, you drag so much like cement and crud when you get home. So when he gets home, he's now, as soon as he opens the door, he puts the keys on the hook, and then he takes the boots off, and the socks go in the little hamper. And then he meal preps and like uses those little Pyrex glass containers. So, I'll help him out, do dishes and stuff. He works a lot of hours and everything. So after he puts his little socks in the little hamper and puts his boots off, he takes the lids off and puts it in the tray, and he rinses them out with water and puts them in there where I need to put them on the dry rack.
Has he conditioned you?
I don't know.
She doesn't want to admit that one. It's okay. It's okay. But usually, if you condition one person, there's a good chance they've conditioned you in some way too.
He's always telling me I need to relax. He goes, my house is not your preschool classroom. Not everything needs the label maker.
Yeah, it sounds like he's trying to condition you too. And like I said, if you're around some people a lot,
Mhm.
probably are already conditioning them and they are conditioning you, and you may not be aware of it. But now that you know what operant conditioning is, you might be aware of it. So you've been doing basic psychology and you didn't even know you were doing it. So
Yep.
congratulations. Yay. And I'm sure all of you can think of things that you've done for maybe people in your life, or maybe your boss may do for you, to condition you to do things a certain way. It happens all the time. And we may not even be aware of it happening.
So is it like pretty much my ex, she wasn't really big into sneakers until like she started dating me, and then all of a sudden she wound up being real super big into like Jordans and everything.
Yep. You conditioned her, and it may have started out as just like classical conditioning. The sneakers were paired with you and she liked you, so therefore she made the pair. But the longer you're around, she may have developed, oh wow, hey, these really feel good on my feet, I get a lot of attention with this. So it may have been a combination of both classical and operant conditioning. But yeah, it's pretty powerful stuff. Okay, everyone, you want to write this definition down?
Hey, ma'am,
Yes.
I'm just thinking of something. In politics, I know I don't like to bring up politics ever, but operative conditioning principles, isn't that sort of a staple in politics where you have,
And everything.
especially politics though?
No, everything. School, in a classroom, in a household, in a marriage, in friendship.
Okay.
Yeah, it's everywhere. But yeah, I mean, I could come up with examples in politics too, but I usually try to avoid that
Yeah.
also in a classroom. But yeah, it can be in politics all the time, but it can be everywhere, literally
Mhm.
everywhere. And we don't even know sometimes that we're being conditioned. So reinforcement always increases the likelihood of the behavior. I'll say it a couple times. Reinforcement always increases the likelihood of the behavior. Punishment may or may not. Reinforcement always increases the likelihood of the behavior. Punishment may or may not. Positive and negative reinforcement have a greater chances of increasing the behavior you want to see. Punishment may work or it may not work. So let's use an example. Again, if I was in a classroom, I would have two students right in front of me. So I'm going to use, let's see, who am I? I'm going to use Nate and I'm going to use Sarah. Okay. So Nate and Sarah, we're just going to pretend we're in class. And Nate, oh my gosh, these are wonderful notes. These are like the greatest notes I've ever seen anyone take. Everyone, if you're having trouble in class, you should go to Nate and check out his notes because you will ace my test. Nate, are you going to keep taking notes? Yes? We can't hear you. Yeah.
Yes, because it's positive reinforcement, correct?
Yeah, that's right. Because what did I want? I want my students to take notes. And I just praised you in front of all of your peers. Everyone loves to be praised in front of their peers, except maybe that 1% that fall off the chart, because you always have like 1% that doesn't go with what the majority goes with. But yeah, okay, you ready, Sarah? You know what's coming, right? So, Sarah, what's this garbage? Oh my gosh, look at these notes. They're horrible. Oh, you're going to fail my class. Don't do what Sarah's doing. You should learn how to take notes. Sarah, these are terrible. Oh my God. I'd be in your face by now, so you should be happy we're on Zoom, right? Sarah, is there a chance that you may take notes just to shut me up?
Maybe.
That's negative reinforcement. There's a greater chance that you'll take notes to take away that negative stimulus. If I punish you, there's not a great chance that you're going to want to take notes. You could develop a hatred toward me. You may start talking about me. You may start writing things on Facebook about me. You may even make a TikTok video about how crazy I am and how I yelled at you. Would I get you to take notes? No. So reinforcement increases the likelihood of the behavior. Not always, but the likelihood of the behavior. Punishment may or may not. Let me give one more example. Real life story. Back when I taught 8th grade, I had a young man, and he knows I tell this story. Any story I tell, I've gotten permission to tell from students. This young man was like a fun-loving kid, but he was in trouble every single day. I mean, every day. And I was in charge of the student assistance team. So it was my job to try to figure out how to get this kid to behave and do what he was supposed to do so he could graduate. He was a smart kid, but he was in trouble literally every class, every single period, almost every day he was sent to the office. And I'd be like, Benji, how about a longer lunch hour? If you don't do this, we'll give you 15 extra minutes of lunch. We'll give you computer time. We'll give you no homework passes. Like all the things that normal teachers start, to give to try to get students here, food, well, everything you could think of. And nothing was working. And I really thought this kid was going to fail out of our school because he just wasn't doing anything. He was in trouble every day. And one day on out of the cafeteria, we had a little playground, and I had lunch duty out there, and I was overhearing what he was saying to his friend. I really want to go fishing this Saturday with my dad, but he's gonna back out again because he doesn't have time for me. Light bulb, we call that insight learning. That little light bulb goes off. Benji, you like to go fishing? Yeah, I really like fishing. You like fishing with your dad? Yeah, he used to take me fishing all the time when I was little, but now he never has time. Oh, okay. So I called his dad and I said, I got a deal. If I can get Benji to sign a contract, would you sign the contract that if he does everything he's supposed to do, you'll take him fishing on Saturday? I'm going to just try it 1 week to see if it works. Yeah, I'll do that. Because I could tell Benji wanted his dad's attention. And he was getting his dad's attention by getting in trouble every single day from all the teachers. Even though he was getting yelled at, even though he was being grounded, it didn't matter. He was getting what he wanted, his dad's attention. It was negative attention, but he didn't care. He was getting what he wanted. Oh, Bentley's saying hi. Everyone say hi to Bentley. Yeah, there he is. So yes, Bentley, soon. Break is soon. You'll be good. So I said, you're okay with this? He goes, yeah. So I didn't even know. Now this kid was in the principal's office like 8 periods a day. I'm like, if we can make that down to 3 times a day, just 3 times a day. So I wasn't expecting perfect. So we set up this contract that if he was only sent to the principal's office, that means he only misbehaved 3 periods a day for 1 week. He would go fishing with his dad on Saturday. So he signed the contract. His dad signed the contract. Monday came. Benji did not go to the principal's office at all Monday. Not at all. Or Tuesday, or Wednesday, or Thursday, or Friday. He was the best student. Friday came, I called his dad and said, you're not going to believe this. This was just awesome. He said, oh yeah, I know I didn't get any phone calls. But you know what? I'm kind of busy, so I don't think I'm going to be able to take, I'm like, no. You're not backing out of this. Benji did his part. You are taking him fishing. But You are taking him fishing if I have to come to your house at 8 o'clock in the morning and drag you out of bed. This kid did what we asked him, and you made a deal. Put your wife on. Cut his wife. And I said, I'm going to call in the morning, and I'm dead serious. I will come down and make your husband go fishing with this kid because he did his part. And the dad did. He took him fishing. And they kept that up every single Saturday for the rest of the school year. And Benji graduated with all A's, never getting in trouble again. Benji went on to high school. Benji graduated second in his class and is now a CEO of a company in Philadelphia. All because his dad took him fishing. Because we figured out what Benji really wanted as a reinforcer, and that was to be with dad. If you find the right reinforcer, you can change anybody's behavior, including your own. That's the key, because reinforcement always increases the likelihood of the behavior. Punishment may or may not. We'll be taking a break in a couple minutes, so hang in there. So, positive or negative reinforcement, it doesn't matter. If you see the word reinforcement, train your brain. That means increases the likelihood of the behavior. Okay. Punishment. Now, there's both positive and negative punishment, but in Intro to Psychology, we just talk about punishment in general. So when we talk about punishment, punishment can be effective, but it has to have these three components. So you want to remember these three components. It has to be swift, it has to be consistent, and it has to be appropriately adversive. That means negative in some way. Okay, so little Johnny, little Susie, they want to go to the dance. They can't go to the dance because their parents are saying, hey, you know, we're having some adults over for a party and we can't leave and take you to the dance and pick you up. You can go next time, but you have to stay in the house. Well, little Johnny, little Susie, and little Desiree didn't want to do that. They wanted to go to dance. So while the parents were having this party, they knew their parents wouldn't come up to check on them till around 11. So if they left the dance at 10, they would be home plenty of time. So they snuck out their bedroom windows and all met, and they went to the dance, and they came back, and they were safe and sound in their beds. And their parents came up around 11, not knowing they ever left. No punishment then, right? It's like 6 months later, and the parents find out that they snuck out of the house. Will that punishment be effective 6 months later? Nope. The further away it is from the time they did the act, the less likely the pairing's going to take place. So acquisition isn't taking place the further we pull it apart. If, when they were climbing back through the window, their parents were sitting there in the room and said, hey, you're grounded, then it may have been effective. So it has to be swift. It has to be consistent. So kids do this all the time. Any of you that are parents here, and we were all kids, so we knew who to ask and how to ask it to get what we wanted. And if you had two parents, you could even play them off each other. Well, Dad said I could do that, but you know, if you're not as cool as Dad, you know, kids learn how to get what they want, just like we did. Just like your kids, if you have children, will learn what buttons to push to get you to do something. So you have to be consistent. It's funny how we talk about, people plan everything for, if they marry or they have children together. Very rarely do couples plan how they're going to discipline their kids before the kids are actually born. One of the most important things to do, but most people never do it until it's time when they have to make a decision and they need to be consistent. So punishment has to be swift, it has to be consistent, and it has to be appropriately adversive. So, an example, you go to your room, you talk back to your mom. But in their room, they have a 52-inch flat screen TV. They have a computer. They have their own little mini refrigerator. They have their Wii. They have their iPod, their iPad. They have their everything. That's not a punishment. That's freedom, right? That's not negative.
And it conditions them to learn to be antisocial, to avoid getting yelled at. And so then they just stay in their rooms.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's fine. Then they're like, hey, this is good. I'll stay here. I don't mind getting punished. I got everything I want, because that's typical of a reaction that can happen around adolescence. They like their own space. They're growing into, be young adults. So they like their own space. If they do something, you talk back to your mom, you just lost your phone for 3 weeks. Oh my gosh, hell would freeze over. They will just freak out, just like if you had your phone taken away from you for 3 weeks. Think about it. It's not only kids. What do you mean? I need my phone. How am I gonna? Nope, lost your phone. That's it. That's the one right now for adolescents. Take their phone. That will work. But to make it work better, pair it with reinforcement and say, well, no phone for a whole week. But if you do what you're supposed to do and don't talk back to us, Sunday we'll let you use your phone for 3 hours. Then you say the next week, if you don't do anything, that you're not supposed to do, we'll let you have your phone the whole weekend. And if you do nothing wrong, you can have your phone back with no restrictions. See, we've now paired something that they want, their phone back, with the behavior that we want to see. There's a greater chance now, because reinforcement always increases the likelihood of the behavior. So if you pair it with punishment, the two together, it can be an effective method. But just plain punishment, if you say, don't hit your brother by beating your child with a belt. What are you teaching? Hey, it's okay for adults to beat, but it's not okay for me to beat. Yeah, it's not a connection that's being made. They can fear the person who punishes them. I've said this many times to parent groups when I've given talks. No parent wants their child to fear them. They want their children to respect them. But there's something wrong if you want your child to fear you. Because if they're ever in a situation that's dangerous, you don't want your child fearing you. You want them to feel secure enough that they could call on you for help. If they're afraid of you, they're not going to call you. They're not going to share anything with you. And that can be a very slippery slope. So when you combine punishment with reinforcement, you can have some really, really good results. There are different types of reinforcers, primary or secondary reinforcers. Primary reinforcers are things you didn't have to learn. Food, air, water. I'm holding you underwater. You need air. You will die without air. Nobody had to teach you that. That's a primary reinforcer. You need that. You may or may not think you need that 52-inch flat screen TV, but you don't need it. It's not primary, it's a secondary reinforcer. You're going to get a grade on the test you took today. That's a secondary reinforcer. You had to learn that somewhere. Somewhere you learned that CCAC's grading scale, 90 to 100 is an A, 80 to 89 is a B. You learned that. You go to a different school and the grading scale may be different. It may be 93 to 100 is an A, 85 to 92 is a B. They're stuff that we've learned. They're tokens. Some schools don't even have grades. They have marked progress, satisfactory progress, needs improvement. Well, what does that relate to, right? There's no numbers associated to it. You would have to learn that. We also have a hard time, and this is the last 4 generations. Okay, so I'm not picking on anyone. Have a problem with the difference between immediate and delayed reinforcement. So let's say there was a party on Sunday night and you didn't study for this test yet, but you really wanted to go to that party because it sounded like it could be really great. Would you go to the party and get immediate reinforcement? Or would you say, no, I can't go to the party because I have to study for the exam, but it would be really cool if we all went out after the exam? Delayed reinforcement. The last 4 generations, many, many, many people always go for the immediate versus delayed. That's an issue, and it's why many young people have gotten in some credit card debt. When they go to college, they don't have the cash, they put it on their credit card. Bill comes at the end of the month, except they only make, say, maybe $200 on their work study, but they have a credit card bill that's $600. They can get in a lot of financial issues. Or a young couple that may get married. They want to buy a house. Well, they've just spent a small fortune on a wedding. You realize many weddings cost over $20,000. You're taking on a house payment, maybe a car loan. The next thing you know, you're in debt. What's the number one reason that divorces occur in marriages? Money. You're setting yourself up for failure. Again, wouldn't it be better to put that money aside and save it until you have everything paid off and you can afford to make a large down payment on the house instead of struggling every month to just pay the minimum? You know, immediate versus delayed reinforcement. Just like we talked about in classical conditioning, generalization is the same way, discrimination is the same way, extinction is the same way, spontaneous recovery is the same way. The only thing different is shaping. So an example, we can shape behavior, ours or somebody else's. Let's say you want to train your dog to go outside. You start with a puppy pad, maybe in maybe a hallway, and it's scented to attract the dog to go on that puppy pad. And every day you move that puppy pad a little closer to the door. Every single day you move it closer to the door. Eventually you put it right by the door. Then you have it halfway in and halfway out of the door, making sure that you open the door when the dog needs to go. Then you put the puppy pad outside. The dog goes on the puppy pad outside. You can actually put the puppy pad so your dog will go to the exact same spot every time it needs to relieve itself. Eventually, you take the puppy pad away. Your dog is potty trained within less than 2 weeks. That's operant conditioning using shaping. You shape the dog's behavior by moving the puppy pad every day, got a little closer, so it moved a little closer. You shaped the behavior. There are different types of reinforcement schedules. Continuous, straightforward here, and I have a nice little graph here. You don't have to memorize the graph. I just have that. Just continuous, pretty obvious. You're teaching a dog to sit, bone, sit, bone, sit, bone. Continuous. Partial. You ever get partial credit? That's partial reinforcement. You did part of it, so you get half, right? Fixed interval. Fixed period of time. The word interval means time. So you get paid the 1st and the 15th. That's a fixed interval. Okay. Variable interval. Let's say you work on commission. You get paid when you have a sale. So you don't know if you're going to get paid this day or another day. So you may go to work on Monday and have 5 sales, and you get paid on Tuesday because of the sales you had on Monday. But Tuesday you have no sales. So Wednesday you don't get paid. Wednesday you had no sales. So Thursday you don't get paid. But Thursday you had a lot of sales. So you get paid Friday. That's what we mean by variable interval. It changes. A change in the time period. Fixed ratio, fixed amount. Your farmer, Giant Eagle, will pay you so much money for a bushel of apples. It doesn't matter how many apples are in it, a bushel, apples to the top. You get paid, okay, this is $5 for this, period. Doesn't matter if this bushel has 1 extra apple or not. Variable ratio, variable months. You work in the car industry and you get paid every time you build a car. To start the next week, only when you build 4 cars do you get paid. The next week you get paid when you build 3 cars. It's a variable ratio. Now, look at this page. I made you a cheat sheet slide. If you know everything on this slide, you understand operant and classical conditioning. So if you can, after you read the material and look over the stuff, if you understand all this stuff, you will do well on the learning part of the test. That's a summary of this whole lecture. And I told you there's one more slide. And then we have our break. So when we talk about social learning theory, observational learning. Remember in one of my descriptions, I talked about Benji and I said I had this light bulb go off? That's insight learning. It's the aha experience. Do you ever do something and you really didn't know and you're like, oh, I'm going to give up, and you walk away and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, oh, that's what I have to do. That's insight learning. Social learning theory is Albert Bandura, and we talked about him last week and his Bobo doll study for when children were in a room and they had these Bobo dolls. Little kids don't know what Bobo dolls are. They're big blow up dolls that when you hit them, they're like weebles. They go all the way down to the floor and they come back up. They look like clowns. I know many people of the younger generation on this call have never seen a Bobo doll in your life. So you may have to Google it to see a picture of it. But people around my age remember what Bobo dolls are. Bandura wanted to see how the children would react if older children who younger children look up to and pay attention to because they want to be older, watch these older children beat the living daylights out of these Bobo dolls. And as soon as the older children left, they went over and they played with those Bobo dolls. They didn't touch them before, but now I saw the older kids doing it. We learn from models. Do you ever look around when you didn't really know what to do and look to see what other people were doing so you could figure it out? We do it all the time. And that's why we're going to spend a whole night on social learning theory. So, okay, we are at break time. Does anybody have any question that I can answer quickly before the break? I mean, I will stay on after Zoom too, but we still have to do the memory stuff and we still have to do the activity. Okay, Sade, you have a question?
Yes, my question was, is, or how is, or even if it is, conditioning and correlation, how are they, or if they are related?
Yeah, there can be correlational research on different types of conditioning, and there can be some actual studies, especially studies that have like case studies or studies where they've really made sure there were no biases taking place. So that would get rid of the correlational part. But yeah, there would be studies with both. Yeah. Stacy?
Yeah, I just had a little bit of an emergency pop up, so I might not be on for a little bit.
Okay.
But I'll go back and make sure I watch this part of it.
Not a problem. I hope everything works out.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, so you're on break. Let's say like 12 minutes, so 1:45. And we'll start off with that classical conditioning activity, that one activity we're going to do as a group, and then we're going to do memory. Okay, so I'll see you in 12, well, now 11 and a half minutes. Okay, welcome back. So I told you I was going to share one of the classical conditioning worksheet scenarios. So we're going to do the first one. So when Maya gets back to the dorm after jogging around the campus, he likes to take a quick shower before going to class. One morning while taking a shower, he hears someone flushing a nearby toilet. Suddenly, extremely hot water comes rushing out of the shower head, and Maya experiences excruciating pain. After muttering a few obscenities, he continues showering. A few minutes later, Maya hears another toilet flush, and he leaps out of the shower. So what it's asking you to do is to pick out what is the unconditioned stimulus, what's the unconditioned response, what's the neutral or the conditioned stimulus, and what's the conditioned response. So if you remember, the unconditioned stimulus is something that you didn't have to learn. So when you look at this scenario, extremely hot water touching your skin is something you wouldn't have to learn. That as soon as that happens, that's going to hit those sense receptors, and it's going to do what? Then it's going to cause pain. So the unconditioned stimulus here is the hot water, and the unconditioned response is, that pain. But there's more to it, right? Not only did he experience pain there, he jumped out of the shower because of it. So you would say the unconditioned response to the hot water was actually pain and jumping out of the shower. What was the neutral stimulus that became the conditioned stimulus? The flushing of the toilet. Again, toilet flushing doesn't cause pain and people to jump out of the shower, right? Unless it's been learned. And in this case, that was the conditioned stimulus. And the conditioned response was that he jumped out of the shower. 95% of the times, the unconditioned response is the same as the conditioned response. There are times that it's not, but I promise not to put a tricky one on the test. It's going to be similar to, this type of scenario. Okay, so these are on Blackboard. There's a couple of them there, and then the answers, there they are also going to be up there too. But I'm going to give you a day or two to actually, muddle around and practice them without having the answers, because you're not going to have answers on the test. So I want you to feel comfortable trying to pick out the unconditioned stimulus, the unconditioned response, the conditioned stimulus, and the conditioned response. That's 4 points right on the test. That's 4 questions. So if you can do that, you already got 4 right on the test next week, just on that one question. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of this. And let me share again, because we're now doing memory. Kind of fits, right? Because that's what we're asking you guys to do in taking classes, to just remember things. So to start off, let's start with what are the fundamentals? We need the vocabulary. So encoding is getting information into your memory. And you never have to memorize them word for word, just as long as you understand them so you could apply them. Storage is retaining information in your memory. Retrieval is getting information out of your memory. And rehearsal is one way that you can hold on to information. It isn't always the best way, but it is one way that we all have used many times through our life. Now, there are 3 different types of memory stores, okay? And you're going to find out that there's a method to my madness tonight, because this PowerPoint is set up to improve your memory. All my PowerPoints are set up to improve your memory, from the stories to how they're laid out and what I say in what order. And you're going to figure that out tonight, because I'm doing what the research says to do to improve somebody's memory. So first, there are 3 types of memory stores. The difference between them is duration. That's how long the information can be maintained in that memory store, and capacity, which is how much. So duration and capacity make the difference for these 3 memory stores. So for my visual learners, and 80% of the population here in the United States are visual learners as one of their learning styles. Hence why all your teachers do PowerPoint or write on the board or give you a handout. Sensory memory, short-term memory, rehearsal can help that to get the long-term memory. So sensory memory, short-term memory, long-term memory. So for all my visual learners, there are the 3 memory stores. Let's start with sensory memory. Sensory memory duration is extremely short, less than 1 second. That's it, less than a second. But the capacity is very, very large. So you're a passenger in a car, you look out the window, and you might remember 1 tree or maybe 1 color of house or something. But your brain took in every single image that you passed. But if you didn't pay attention to it, in that 1 second, it was gone, right over your head, completely gone. Okay? Right now, your butt is sitting on a chair. You weren't thinking about your butt sitting on a chair until I just said that. But your brain knew that your butt was sitting on the chair. You might have the sound of maybe an air conditioner or a fan going on in your house right now that you weren't paying attention to until I just said that. Maybe cool air on your legs if you have shorts on. Sensory memory. It lasts a second. So your brain acknowledges everything, but only pays attention to certain things. And those things then move on to the next memory store. But just in case you just forgot what I said, I'm repeating it. So if you didn't pay attention the first time, here it is again. See what I mean by method to my madness? Sensory memory, large memory store, fades very quickly. You have to access it. You have to pay attention to it in order to move the information from sensory memory to short-term memory. So if you didn't remember any of that stuff I just reread to you, I just proved my point. Because if you weren't paying attention to everything that I said, you wouldn't remember. Like right now, I could ask you, because, I talk with my hands, if I have a ring on. If you weren't paying attention, you may not know if I was wearing a ring or not. Talk with my hands all the time. You might not even know if I was wearing a watch or not. Or if you do know I had a watch on, you may not know what color the face is or what color the band is. You might not even remember what color my shirt was or what color my glasses are. Because if you didn't have to pay attention to it, that memory was gone before it had a chance to get encoded. Short-term memory. Short-term memory, it's where you're aware. Sorry about that. My neighbor's walking her dog. Short-term memory, it's where you're aware of what's in your memory. Hold on just one second. I'm going to try to shut up my dog for just a second. Hold on. Sorry for that. It's the one thing that I haven't been able to train him to not bark when my neighbor's dog is being walked.
The dog has conditioned her.
Thank you. Sorry. Like I said, trained him to do a lot of things, but that's one thing. Dogs will be dogs,
Seems like he trained you or conditioned you.
That's right. He sure did. A lot of ways. Some that I'm not very proud of, Let me okay. But that was a very astute observation. So, short-term memory. We're talking very small capacity, 5 to 9 items only. The duration, about 30 seconds. That's it. And if you don't get it from short-term memory to long-term memory in that time, it's going to be gone, just like it was for sensory memory. Now, what can help that? Rehearsal. You can say it over and over and over again, and that can help, but 5 to 9 items, and that's it. So we say 7 plus or minus 2. Why that's important? How many numbers are in a phone number? 10. There never used to be 10, but we had so many phones, we needed more numbers. Way back in the old days, it was like evergreen 2422. But now we have area codes. You can remember those longer numbers if you chunk the numbers, if you put them in groups, because people have trouble remembering numbers like phone numbers because they're 10 digits now. Now, you may say, hey, well, I just program it in my phone. People lose their phones. They don't all back them up to the cloud. And then you're without a phone. Or even worse, sometimes parents will buy their children cell phones, little children. They actually have phones for little boys and little girls. They're like little like flip phones. They're pink and they're blue. And you program them. They have 4 buttons. That's it. You can do mom, dad, grandma, you can program them to what? But they're associated with phone number. Well, what happens when your child, like typical children, will lose things. Anybody who's a parent knows the child who's lost a glove and you just bought it like the day before, or their hat or whatever. Well, they lose phones too. So they're out somewhere, they've lost, they're lost, they don't have their phone because they've lost their phone. And somebody said, well, do you know what your phone number is? And the kid will go, yeah, yeah, my mommy's number is 1. What are the other numbers? No, it's 1. You just push 1. There are parents that don't even teach kids their phone number anymore because it's programmed into their phone, which is a problem if you don't have your phone, or your phone gets damaged, or your phone gets lost, or that's a problem.
Can I mention something about the phone number thing?
Sure.
Well, I'm an assistant teacher in a preschool room, and that's one of the things we learn when we're doing transitions after preschool. Like we're doing transitions into kindergarten. So we do like a practice walk, getting on the bus, like even though we put like tags on them, which building they belong to, all this stuff, but we take pretend phones, not like, iPhones or whatever. We take pretend phones that they would see in a principal's office or in a classroom, and we show them those numbers for like a week straight. Not in the order that needs to be, like 412 blah blah blah, but see if they start recognize those numbers, and then they practice pressing those same buttons for a week, and then once they get that going, we let the parent know we're going to do a phone call just so if in case of emergency they know your number. So then before the transition to kindergarten, they call their mom or their dad and say, hey, I remembered your number today.
That's awesome. And it's so important because we have, like I said, we have adults that don't remember their phone numbers or never learn them because they automatically program it. People forget birthdays, because they don't think they have to remember anything anymore.
Right, and we're in the last stretch of the school year, and because of COVID, everything's virtual. We can't do our transition to kindergarten where we go to the next school building. Will be where a lot of them will go, and they walk the halls, they see the classroom and everything. So the teachers at the building that they might be going to, our primary building that they would send off to kindergarten, they made for part of their preschool celebration, they made virtual kindergarten, like a day in the life of kindergarten. Like some of the things that they see is their birthday calendar, their ABCs, like some of the things that they already do. And then right now we're doing transition to kindergarten, tying shoes, holding on to railings, like things, because they're not going to have, the teachers in the building holding their hand when we're going from the cafeteria to the playground, like they need, and practicing zippering jackets, because when it's playground time, you need to zipper your jacket, because once you miss that time, you might be on the.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really, really, really important because they're not necessarily getting that stuff at home.
Right.
So, yeah, awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it's still something you need to do, is to learn to memorize some things. Now, I'm not saying, like in my day in school, we had to memorize a lot of things and didn't necessarily have as much of problem solving, which is really, really important.
Right.
But somewhere back, it was like in 7th grade, Miss Devonkus, now I'm 62. We had to learn the helping verbs. Be, am, is, are, was, were, and being, been, has, had, do, does, did, should, can, could, will, would, may, might, must. I still know them. When do I use them?
Never.
Teach this class. That's it. Or maybe you had to memorize a poem, or maybe you were in a play, or I mean, there's some things, but things like your social security number, you should be able to memorize. You should be able to memorize your bank number.
Right.
You know, when it comes out as 10 digits on the bottom of your check, you may not remember it that way. But if you chunk it, if you put them in, you know, a form where it's smaller. So like your social security number is 3 digits, then 2 digits, then 4 digits. People can remember it in chunks because that's only 3 items that they have to remember. And that's less than that 5 to 9 that most people have. Okay.
Right.
Yeah,
when
but
you're saying-
it's harder now to remember because we have computers, we have passwords, we have usernames, we have to change our passwords every week because of hackers that are getting in people's accounts. It's a constant battle to try to keep memory, you know, focused and you know, sharp and you know, that kind of thing. It's difficult.
Well, and fluid intelligence, we're going to talk about types of intelligence next time, but fluid intelligence actually gets worse with age, where crystallized intelligence gets better. For the password thing, you know, we always suggest you should have a basic password that you add to it, like you add things to the front, or you add something in the middle, or you add something to the end, that you only have to remember that chunk that you changed, and everything else basically stays the same. But you make a really, really, really good password. Like my password for grades is 18 digits / characters / letters, upper and lower case, long.
You remember all that?
Yes.
Oh,
Incredible.
Because once you set the basic password, then every time you change it, you only change certain components of it. And, you know, like I said, so I may change just 4 digits or 4 letters. And then the next time I change them to digits, or I change something to lowercase or uppercase, or I add an asterisk or something like that. But you have the basic set in your long-term memory. And then you can use that password many places by just changing maybe 1 letter or changing 1 number. And that's the way you get around that. Because yeah, some places have to change their password every week. You know,
Yeah,
but for like grades at CCAC and everything like that, we have to do it every 90 days. I change mine a little more often because we change it more often at our high school. So I'm just kind of used to it. But that's how you do it. You make one really awesome first password, and then you tweak that.
Yeah, we tried that, and now they've told us, well, it's automatically set into the algorithm of, you know, what they're doing. If you had like a password that said Big Bob 94 and you wanted to add on to Big Bob 90, it knows that you're trying to, you know, change it. So they don't want you to, you know, associate any passwords that you have used in the past. It'll reject it automatically. It's becoming so smart that it, you know, it's forcing you.
Yeah,
to,
I don't use words. I don't use words in my password at all. I use combinations of numbers and letters. So it's a
Wow.
one time, once I memorize it, then, or I'll make a story. That's a good way to remember something. You make a story out of the letters and you remember the story in your head. So it doesn't come up as a word. So it's much more difficult for someone to steal your password that way by like looking at your computer or things like that. But yeah, you're right. It has become much more challenging, but that's one of the ways that some of us do it to try to help our memory out. So thank you for sharing. Short-term memory and working memory are basically the same thing. Working memory is actually better terminology. But short-term memory is kind of consistent in all the books, so they would be interchangeable on a test. So when we talk about working memory, it's because we have to work on the material we're trying to remember to get it to long-term memory. It doesn't necessarily come naturally. Some people have improved those skills. People who are students already have a better memory than someone who's never been a student before. It takes practice, and we get better as we practice. And many of the techniques that we're going to talk about tonight should have been taught way back in first, second, and third grade, but some people will tell me that they never learned this stuff until they took my class, which is kind of sad for our education system, but at least they're getting it now. So again, remember that we follow that pattern of repetition. So for long-term memory, we're going from sensory memory to short-term memory to long-term memory. Long-term memory duration, hours to years. The capacity is huge. We used about 10% of our available memory. That's it, 10%. Just think if we could just get it 2 or 3 more percent for people. Herman Ebbinghaus created a list of nonsense syllables to try to get people to remember these nonsense syllables. And he found that people remembered the ones at the beginning of the list that he gave them and the ones at the end of the list. But the stuff in the middle was very difficult to remember. And that's because once they got to that 5 to 9 item point, either they had to transfer information to the long-term memory to keep encoding the new stuff coming in, or they had to try to rehearse and hold on to what they already remembered and not encode the new stuff. And we're going to actually do an activity right toward the end of class that's going to show you that. That study of Ebbinghaus is known as serial position effect, where we have the first things that we learn, that's called primacy. So first things are much better at recall. And the last things that we hear, the last things we learn, we have much better recall. And the stuff in the middle is kind of like mush. We remember some stuff, but not everything. So I want you to think about this. When I set up my lectures, I said I do what the research says. I know that means you're going to remember the stuff at the beginning and the stuff at the end more than all the stuff in the middle. And then we have a break, and then I got beginning again, and I got end again. So I'm going to put key stuff that I want you to remember in those positions on my slides, because I want you to remember them, and the research tells me you're going to remember them there. So if you just forgot what I said, which some of you may have, think about, don't say it out loud, think about, do you know what primacy effect is? I just said it 45 seconds ago. Could you give me a definition? What's recency? Could you give me a definition? And why do we have poor recall for the stuff in the middle? If you can't answer those 3 questions that we just did 45 seconds before without going back and looking, you did not encode that information into your long-term memory. It either lost its way in that one split second when I started talking about something else, your attention went off of it and it was gone. Or you had it in your short-term memory, and when I switched the slide, it didn't get encoded into long-term memory, so it went bye-bye too. Scary, isn't it? Let's look down here at the bottom of the slide. For you, is it easier to remember a picture of a cup of coffee and a muffin, or the words coffee and the muffin? Most people will say the image. That's important to remember because visual images can really, really help you encode information, store information, and retrieve information. Hence why I tell stories. It's not because I want to tell you stories about my life or big. The stories will encode in your long-term memory, and it'll be easier for you to make that long-term memory and then retrieve it. So there is a method to my madness. You just didn't know it. Now you do. When we talk about how we make those memories work, depth of processing. It may be very shallow, which is just appearance, or it may be appearance plus maybe something else like a sound, or it may be deep, where we actually have to understand the meaning. So let me give you an example. All this other stuff is up here for you to look back on later to remember this. Let's say the stimulus is gain, GAIN. Shallow processing would be in your memory, you just remembered that the word was printed in capital letters and it had 4 letters and it was a G, an A, an I, and an N. That's it. That's shallow processing. You know nothing else about it. Moderate processing. It rhymes with train or disdain or pain. You know a little bit more about that stimulus, but not a heck of a lot. Not anything would necessarily be useful. But if you do deep processing, would the word gain fit into this sentence and then the sentence makes sense? I have nothing to gain by helping you. See, now you have to know what the word gain means. And then you have to be able to apply it. You have to problem solve. Deep processing is the way to go. Except many people don't deep process when they study for tests. You took your first test, your first Shablousky test. There were some questions on there that you had to deep process information. It wasn't straight memorizing. You had to be able to apply it. In this day and age, we have Google, we have Yahoo, we have everything at our fingertips that we can search. But if you don't know how to use that information, what good does it do you? You may memorize, Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, but if you have no idea how to use that material, you've just memorized a bunch of printed numbers and letters. Shallow processing. So anytime you study, and this isn't just for my class, any class you study for, the goal is to do deep processing. Do you understand it? Remember the slide on the learning lecture that we just did? I said I gave you a cheat sheet slide. If you know and understand everything on this slide, you understand this lecture. You should make sure you know all those things and what they mean, because they was the core component of the lecture. You should do that with every class. Like, take your notes at the end and circle the things that are important. And if you circle something and you don't understand it, then go to your book and look up that thing. If you missed something, then you email the teacher or you Google it, but you don't just leave it a question, because then that doesn't get encoded. And I guarantee somewhere along the line, that thing that you know you should have looked up shows up on the test. It happened to me when I was in school, and I'm sure it happens to you. Process the information. So this slide is just to remind you about the thing we just talked about. That's the only function it has. How you organize it, again, just rehearsal doesn't always work. And then we have things called flashbulb memories. And we are finally at the point that many of my students weren't even born at 9/11. But anyone who was alive during 9/11 will have what they call a flashbulb memory. They will be able to tell you exactly where they were when they heard about 9/11. They might even be able to tell you what they were doing. They may even be able to tell you who they were with that day, later on in the day. And if there was a strong enough emotional connection, they may even be able to tell you what they had for dinner that night. Think how many years ago that was. Nowadays, other flashbulb memories could be if you lived in an area that had like a hurricane or, a twister. If you were in Washington, D.C. with the storming of the Capitol. Think of how the news media covered that event. People watched that over and over. That information got encoded. So years from now, COVID has been encoded. There's no one in this class that will not remember COVID to your dying breath after a year and months of life changing how we knew it. Everyone will remember COVID. You'll be telling your grandchildren about COVID and your great grandchildren, and they're going to not believe it. That's a flashbulb memory. If you can remember what it was like with masks, or worrying about will you be able to get toilet paper, or will you be able to go anywhere, or Zoom on school, here we go, right? It's a flashbulb memory. There are different types of memory. There's short-term, long-term we talked about, but in long-term memory, we have two different types of long-term memory. We have what's called implicit memory and explicit memory. Implicit memory are things that we do many times, like how to, ride a bike, how to tie a shoe. Like if we were in a classroom, I would call on someone to tell me step by step, without using their hands, that I'm some person from Mars, so I don't know what bunny ears are or anything like that, to tell me how to tie a pair of shoes. And I can't tell you how many people have become so frustrated because they could do it faster for me than try to tell me how to do that. It's the same. I've done it with making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, where I'll bring a loaf of bread and I'll bring some peanut butter and I'll bring some jelly and a knife and a spoon, and I'll ask someone, I'm like, okay, who can tell me how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? And they'll be like, well, just put the peanut butter on the bread, and I'll pick up the jar of peanut butter and I'll just plop it right down on the whole loaf of bread. And it's like, well, no, you have to take the bread. It's like, well, you didn't tell me to do that. See, there are certain things that we do all the time that are hard to verbalize, like riding a bike. Once you learn to ride a bike, you will always be able to ride a bike. Even if it's been 20 years, it may take you a while so you don't like flip over the handlebars when you hit the brakes, but you will always know how to ride a bike. It's so ingrained, it's so well learned in your long term memory. That's an implicit memory. Explicit memory are factual things, personal experiences, things that you can discuss and call to mind. All the stories I share, those would be like explicit memories. So, the five major categories of implicit memory are classical conditioned responses. So, we already know those, right? Memories form through non-association. So, any memories you have of, you know, something you learned somewhere along the way that you didn't associate to a name or a person. Any habits that you have, again, there's some conditioning. Any skills that you have, you're a good painter, you're a good carpenter, you know how to change a flat tire, whatever the skill is, that's considered an implicit memory. And priming. Remember, I said we're conditioned all the time by watching TV? Yes, you've been primed since you were a little child between advertising and what you see in the world and what you heard your parents say and what you heard people at school say. You've been primed, whether you know it or not. We all have. So, just in case you forgot what an implicit memory is, here's a slide to remind you. And then there's false memories. And if some of you did the TED Talks already, some of you will do them for extra credit, you're going to see Elizabeth Loftus. And Elizabeth Loftus is the one who did the research on false memories. And she had people in her class watch a series of slides, and it's finally now, it's kind of ironic when I say slideshow, everyone always thinks of PowerPoint, but we're talking actual slides, you know, the little cardboard pieces with film that you project on the wall. That's what we're talking about, because this is like 1978, you know, most of you weren't born. You might not have even been a thought at that point. But she asked participants to view this slideshow and then, you know, asked them, did another car pass the red dots and while it was stopped at the stop sign, or did another car pass the red dots and while it was stopped at the yield sign? Remember, if you weren't paying attention to the sign, you might not know. So your brain may create a memory going, well, there were stops, so it had to be a stop sign, right? How many of you have driven in Pittsburgh? People in Pittsburgh stop at yield signs. Okay. Even if there's no reason for them to stop at a yield sign, they stop at a yield sign. So that memory your brain created may not be correct because you weren't actually paying attention. We create false memories. It's called infantile amnesia in many cases. Prior to the age of 3, most of our memories are created memories that people have told us about. And that's why we think we remember them. I remember my first birthday and getting a cupcake. Now they use whole cakes, a cupcake to like destroy. Do I really remember that? Heck no. I was 1. I didn't have the ability to remember details like, oh, it was a white cupcake with chocolate icing and I got it all over my face and I wiped my hands on the tablecloth. Did I do that? Yes. How did I know I did that? Because for years, people in my family who saw that told me that over and over and over again, to the point I actually feel like I know it. It's a false memory. It happened, but I truly don't remember it from personal experience. What causes us to forget? Decay. We get older. I told you short term memory is 30 seconds. Once you hit 60, it gets to like 25 seconds. So I always use as an excuse short term memory is the first thing to go because I'm over 60. It decreases with age, short term memory. So it's harder to encode information once you get to 60. Not that you can't, you just got to use different techniques. And sometimes there's interference. Have you ever been counting numbers or money and somebody says something to you? So you're going 8, 9, 10, and they'll go 3, and you'll go 4, 5, 6, and you lose count? Or you're counting something and you're watching TV and they say a number and you forget what number you were on? Have you ever forgotten why you go into a room? You don't have to tell me. If you haven't, just wait. You'll go into that room and then what do? Well, it's maybe if I go back into the other room, I'll remember why I came. And you'll get back there and you're like, oh, yeah, that's what it's for. And you'll go back to the other room and you'll forget again. Yes, it does happen. Why? And why does it happen to young people? Because we're so busy and we can only encode what we pay attention to. So if you lay down your keys and you're doing something else at the same time, there's a good chance you won't remember where your keys are, unless that's a place that you always put your keys. Or if you've ever lost the remote control, put it down, or your phone, or your checkbook, or your wallet. I could go on and on. Okay. And sometimes new information interferes with old information, and sometimes old information interferes with new information. And if you remember when we talked about Freud last week, we talked about, Freud's theories. One of them is repressed memories, and that's sometimes memories are so harmful and we don't know how to deal with it. We push them way, way down in our subconscious. Maybe never to come out or to come out slowly when we're able to deal with it. So if your mom or dad or Uncle Bob or Aunt Sue or Aunt Desiree molested you when you were a child, and you care about these people, you don't know what to do with that. You may block that out of your memory. And it might be 20, 30 years later, you start getting little pieces of that in dreams. Because now, 30 years later, you can deal with it, where you couldn't deal with it when you were 5. How do we improve memory? Almost done, gang. Deeper processing. Pick an appropriate way to transfer information. Do what we call distributed practice. If you sat last night and crammed for tonight's test, that's the worst way to study, cramming. Think about this. Would you really want the doctor who's going to do surgery on your brain tomorrow morning that will keep you alive or you will die to have crammed the night before your surgery? If you said yes, you're lying. We don't remember, or if we do remember long enough for the test, As soon as the test is over, most of that material is gone. How should you do it? Distributed practice. So you know there's a test next week in this class. Tonight after the lecture, you should read over your notes. 5 minutes. Read over the notes we did. Just go through the PowerPoint. Tomorrow, reread your notes and start studying. 15 minutes, 20 minutes. You can skip a day, let you have a day off. The next day after that, pull out your notes, pull out the PowerPoints, read part of the book, especially the things that are in the PowerPoint is what you should read. You don't have to read all the other stuff. Distribute the material. Every time you do it, you're reinforcing what you already learned. You'll remember it for the test. Use mnemonic devices. Visualize things in your mind. Use acronyms like Roy G. Biv. Remember we talked about that. Or HOME is for the Great Lakes. Or, every good boy does fine for the notes on the scale. Use mnemonic devices. We actually use one when we do the Big Five personality theory. It's OCEAN. It's the first letter of each one of the Big Five personality theory traits. Method of loci. Imagine a place, say like your house right now. We all have that already encoded in your house. Unless you've lived in your house less than 2 weeks, that's already encoded in long-term memory. Why don't you just attach the stuff you need to know to what's already in your long-term memory? So imagine your bed. Picture your bed right now. Picture you're going to the store and you need to buy a couple items, but you don't want to write a grocery list. So imagine a gallon of milk under your pillow. Imagine a loaf of bread on top of your pillow, a pound of butter in the middle of your bed, some ice cream on the nightstand next to you. You go to the store, you didn't write a note, you need to remember what you needed to go shopping. All you have to do is picture your bedroom. What's under the pillow? The milk. What's on top of the pillow? Bread. What's in the middle of your bed? Butter. What's on the nightstand? Ice cream. Why did I use the bedroom? Because typically you don't find those things in the bedroom. If I needed to go to Bed Bath & Beyond and buy pillows, maybe I'd imagine when I open the freezer door, 2 pillows pop out. It really works. This is not just something I'm making up. This method works. And the last thing we're going to do tonight is the activity. And it's worth your while because it's going to be part of your extra credit for next week's test. So what you need is a piece of paper and a writing utensil. You can use your computer if you have to, but it's just a little harder to do it with the computer. But you can use your computer if you have to. And I'll give you a second. Kind of give me if you're okay, you ready to start. So, we are going to try to improve your memory. I am going to give you 20 words without writing anything down. You need to try to remember those 20 words in order. Most people will remember 5 to 9 of them in the right position. Sometimes my students, because they are students and have a practiced studying will get most of them. I've only had 4 people in 20 years get them all the first try. But by the end of this activity, most of you would get them all once I tell you how to do it. And there's some motivation since you know, so here's some reinforcement. 3 of these words are going to be the extra credit on next week's test. So if you get the 3 words right for next week, you get 3 free points that we'll add. And actual points, not percentage, points that will add to your score. So no pens, no pencils. Try your best to try to remember these words in order. Ready? 1, tree. 2, light switch. 3, stool. 4, clover. 5, ring. 6, gun. 7, dice. 8, skate. 9, cat. 10, bowling ball. 11, goalpost. First aha moment. 12, eggs. 13, witch. Second aha moment. 14, Valentine. 15, paycheck. 16, birthday. 17, magazine. 18, voting booth. 19, golf clubs. 20, cigarettes. Okay, do it now. Number 1 to 20 and write those words in order. Let's see how well you do. I'll give you 2 minutes. 2 minutes to write those words in order. Let's see if anybody can become part of the wonderful 5. We only have 4 that have ever done it. See if you can do it. Remember those words in order. A minute, 30 seconds. One minute. 30 seconds. Okay, put your pencils down. So we're going to go through them. I'm going to tell you how you can improve your memory on them. We're going to first go through and see how many you got right. Be honest with yourself, because you can't tell if you improve your memory if you lie. Like I said, many times people only get 5 because of Ebbinghaus's stuff that we learned. 5 to 9 items is all we can hold in short-term memory unless we can get it to long-term memory. So check your own and write down what the correct answer is so you'll have the list. I will also post the list later on this week. So if you do forget them, they'll be up there so you can have them. So 1 was tree. It looks like a, 1 tree. 2, light switch has 2 positions, on, off. 2 positions, on and off. 3, a stool. Imagine a stool like where you would milk a cow. 3 legs, stool. 4, clover, a 4-leaf clover. 5 is encoded for many people. Not only is it something you would see on your finger, but 5 golden rings. So 5 and ring may already be encoded in your long-term memory. So that will be an easy one to remember for a lot of people. 6, gun. 6 chambers for the bullets. 7, dice. If you play with dice, so 7's a good roll. Lucky 7. 7 come 11. 8 is it sounds like skate. 8 and skate. Or you can imagine someone on skates making the figure 8 in the ice, that infinity sign. 9, a cat. A cat has 9 lives. 10, bowling ball. 10 pins. Got a bowling ball. It's rolling down, trying to hit the 10 pins. Or if you do bowl, there are 10 frames in bowling. So bowling ball. 11, goalpost. Kind of looks like an 11, right? I said this was the first aha moment. This is one of the times that people figure out what I'm doing. 12 was eggs, a dozen of eggs. 13, witch. Think of Halloween, little kid dressing up like a witch. Halloween's on the 31st. Reverse the numbers, 13. Or you may think of something like Friday the 13th. So 13 was witch. 14 was the second aha moment. 14th, Valentine. February 14th is Valentine's Day. 15, paycheck. I actually clued this to you earlier in tonight's lecture. But again, if you weren't looking for it, you didn't pay attention to it. I said, people get paid on the 1st and the 15th. Paycheck, 15th. Or, before COVID, April 15th was the day you basically gave your paycheck to Uncle Sam because it was tax day. So you could encode it that way, giving your money away on the 15th. 16, birthday. Sweet 16 and never been kissed, right? Birthday. 16 is an important birthday for a teenager. 17 is actually the name of a magazine for 17-year-olds, for teenagers. 17 magazine. 18, what do you get to do at 18? Vote. Voting booth. 19, I have to explain a little because if you don't play golf, you wouldn't know this association, but in all the years I've been doing this, I have not been able to find another 19 until this year with COVID. COVID-19. I can change it to, but we're not, it's still too new for people, so I didn't want to use it yet. So 19 is golf clubs. There are 18 holes in golf. When you're done with golf, a lot of people go to the clubhouse and they call that the 19th hole, where you put down your golf clubs and you have a couple drinks with your friends. So 19 was golf clubs. And 20 is cigarettes. There are 20 cigarettes in a pack. Now, count your numbers right. Okay. Is there anyone who got all 20 right? How about 19? Oh, we got a 19.
Yeah, and the one I got wrong is I put golfing instead of golf clubs.
All right. Okay. Nice job. 18. Any 18s out there? 17. 16. 15. 14. 13. Okay, we got a couple more. 12. Good. 11. 10. 9 or below. Okay, so anybody who was 9 or below, you did exactly what Ebbinghaus said you would do. You got between 5 and 9 items. Now, I gave you the trick how to improve your memory. So this is what you have to do. Study those words. 2 minutes tonight, right after we get off. For 2 minutes, picture those things in your mind when you study the words. So 1, you're going to picture a 1 and a tree and just picture it. 2, light switch. Actually picture a light switch. 2 minutes. You can time yourself. You can do more, but 2 minutes at least. And then test yourself. Flip the paper over and see if you can do it. 90% of you will get all 20 words when you do that. If you distribute your practice, that means 3 times between now and next test, those words will be your words for life. You can't tell, but I haven't used paper, nothing. It's not on my screen or anything. I learned those words in my psychology class in 1977. And I still know them. And I did exactly what I just told you to do. Why can you use them? Why are they important? Because they become pegs. They're called peg words. And if they're in long-term memory, anytime you need to remember something, you couldn't remember everything this way, but let's say you did keep forgetting Pythagorean theorem. You can picture a squared plus b squared equals c squared on the trunk of that tree that's associated with 1 that's in long-term memory. And there you are in the test. You need that stupid formula. What is it? All you have to do is picture that tree, and there's the formula. And it will come right back to you. It will retrieve that information. They say college students should have 50 peg words in their long-term memory. Well, I just gave you 20. Use them or not. But 3 of those numbers will be the extra credit on next week's test. So I may say 6, 4, and 20, and you'll have to tell me the words. You should be happy you're not in a regular classroom, because at this point, I would say it's the end of the class, but you're not getting out of the door unless you get the peg word that I give you. And there have been people that have had to go to the back of the line many, many times before they got out the door. And there are others that got out the first time. So you should be happy you're on Zoom, or you would be standing in line trying to get out of the door to go home. Have an awesome night, everyone. I'll post those peg words probably tomorrow or the day after, and I will post the answers to the classical conditioning, examples also. Probably 2 days, because I want you to at least look at it and try to do it yourself. But if you have any questions, email me. I'll send out a link a little later in the week, when I'll be on Zoom, because I'll be on Zoom a couple times because I have my my other classes zooming into my all online classes still have to take their test on Zoom. So I have a couple times. So I'll put that on Blackboard too. You could zoom in and ask me questions while they're taking their exam. So have a good week. Enjoy the nice weather. Remember what we did.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
I'll stay
Thank
on if
you.
anybody
Well,
has-
thank you. Have a good night.
I have one question for you.
Sure.
When you went over that after break, was that one of the activities, right?
Mhm.
Number 2. I couldn't find that in there under. I had like activity 1, and then it goes right to 3.
The correlation thing wasn't there.
No, I had like the first one that we were supposed to do.
Which is past, present, promise.
Yeah, and then it went like straight to number 3. I didn't know if I was like the only
Yeah,
one.
it was the correlation thing that you had to do, and then watch the behaving brain.
But what you went over today, we don't have to. That's
Yeah,
not like
This is now lectures 4 and 5. So this is learning and memory and the activities that go with learning and memory.
okay.
Videos that go underneath where it is in Blackboard is the activity. And if you look on your syllabus, it will also say, so like next week's test is just on learning and memory, nothing else. Just
Okay.
the 2 things we did tonight.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay?
Professor,
Yes.
hey, your peg word for the word vote,
Voting booth. Booth.
okay. Oh, so wait, the word was booth?
Booth. Yeah, BOOTH.
I didn't hear you. Okay.
But that's not your fault. That my enunciation on Zoom may not have been good enough.
Please submit the extra credit assignment as soon as possible.
Yeah, there are. I mean, the activities are on Blackboard. You shouldn't be submitting any of those things until the end.
Gotcha.
I'm talking about
They all come in at the end in one document.
I'm talking about the extra credit assignment.
Well, the extra credit would have to come in by next week because it goes on this test.
Okay. Should we
So-
just mail it to you?
Yeah, everything's emailed. Everything is emailed.
How do you,
Okay.
I've found that people, especially some people that are not as good on computers, struggle with Blackboard. So I do half stuff on Blackboard and half stuff via email, because most of the time they know one at least well, and then hope for the best for the other ones.
ma'am, I question on all activities. You said those are all have to be submitted at the end of the semester or of the
So
course.
in like 4 more weeks.
So, so I've already begun some of those with the TED Talks and all that.
Well, the TED Talks come in. That's not part
Right.
of the activity. That's
Right.
credit.
I figured that out now, but the activities, you said just a minute ago that you want those in one document. What do you mean by that?
You open a Word document, you put your name, you put Tuesday class, you put activity 1, and you put what your answer is for activity 1. Then you put activity 2, you put your answer, what activity 2 is. You put activity 3. So you keep a running Word document that you save on your computer, and you just add it. So at the end, all of them are there.
With the
Send
activity,
them in separately, there's a chance it could get lost. So then when I go to grade it at the end, you're missing activities and you would lose points. But if they're all in one document, you can go back and check before you send it to me that you have all the documents in and you get your 100%. Remember,
Would
class
you,
participation grade, it's not that you have the correct answer, it's that you participated in the class activity.
would you accept, I'm sorry, would you accept, like, I've basically took each of your activities, created a folder for each one, titled each one, and that's how I separate it. And then at the end, could I just send you
one
I'll-
email?
I'll put all that in one folder and you can just then have it that way.
That works.
Is that
As
cool?
long as they come together, because then, like I said, if something's missing when I go to grade it, then that's when you start to lose points. Because, like I said, even if you do the activity and it's wrong, you participated. That's what that grade is. That activity folder is participation points. It's worth 1/6 of your grade. I don't want you to lose points because of your email didn't get to me, or it went to the junk folder, or it just wouldn't go through. But just make sure you back up your stuff. You know, just in case your computer would crash, put it on a flash drive or send it to the cloud. Just back it up so you have it. But I have 30 of you. I have 38 in my other class.
Wow.
You're talking a lot of documents that could get lost if they don't all come together. So just from experience doing things online, this works better. It gives you some time. So if you can't get it done this week because chaos is going on in your house, don't do it this week. Do it next week.
Our subject, okay, so we have, I guess this is a 2-part thing. So we have to choose a subject. And I think I've narrowed it down. When do you need to know that by?
Next week. It's
Next
on the
week.
syllabus next week.
Okay.
Yeah, if
And
you
then-
don't know by next week, then I'm gonna say, okay, these are your choices, pick one of them.
Okay. And then we're gonna do a paper on that. And then we're also gonna do a presentation.
Yeah, you're gonna do a flip grid. It's gonna be like 3 to 4 minutes long. So you're summarizing
on
to
the summary
class.
of what.
Yeah, you're summarizing the class, what your paper was on, because
Oh, okay.
everyone isn't gonna do necrophilia, but people might want to hear about sex with the dead. Not that they want to do it, but I mean, it's a topic that people would be interested to hear the research on. Or not everyone's going to do attention deficit, but they may want to do attention, listen to it. So you're just doing a little quick summary. This also tells me if you know the material and you didn't copy it.
Are we allowed to do any of the subjects on, like I started listening to Dr. Loftus today on her TED Talk, and I found that to be extremely interesting, but it's one of those subjects where you know, there's not a whole lot of stuff I've already tried to find on that.
Yeah, you
I-
have to find something that's gonna give you 5 full pages, because that's the bare minimum. It has to be 5 full pages, 3 sources, legitimate sources, you know, and tell me your topic ahead of time. So you need that much, because if you give me 2 pages, I had a student one time give me 2 pages and they lost 60 points out of the 100. Because
Oh, yeah.
there are
I'll
very
email-
few requirements for this paper. That's one of them. So either expand the topic, like what she was talking about, expand it, find things that are similar and expand your topic, or pick another topic.
would you be able to tell me right now if this topic would be enough in your professional opinion?
What's the topic?
CTE,
Yes.
because I wanted to correlate CTE with other brain problems that are not even being able to be picked up until, which I don't understand why there hasn't been technology. But that's something that I'll write about and elaborate on. But that was wondering if that was a good one that you've had anybody else do that on?
Yep. Yep.
Oh, you have, okay. Okay.
Yeah, there's material out there.
So you mean we're gonna pick up the topic from you, or can we look?
You pick your own topic.
Okay.
Like, that's why I keep dropping these little hints about, oh, this would be, you know, this would be a good topic. This would be a good topic. But after, you know, going through some of these, I'm gonna post other possibilities. So if you have no idea, I mean, you could go just psychology topics in Google, and it will come up with lists of things that you can do. But people tend to do better on a research paper if it's something they're interested in.
Thank you.
And since it's 1/6 of your grade, I want you to pick something that you're interested in.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hello.
Hi.
Okay, here's a problem. I sent all the test papers, but I haven't realized the other one that actually have the list of the numbers. So I accidentally highlight everything on the original paper as the answer and submitted it.
So you didn't send me just the answer sheet?
No, yeah, sending the answer sheet later, but I guess you'll think you'll be confused as to why I sent both of them.
Okay, but do I have the answer sheet that has your answers? Just the answer sheet?
Yeah.
Then that's fine. You told me, I'll know to pitch stuff from before.
Okay.
Okay?
And yeah. And everything you do, it'll be on Blackboard, right?
Everything is on Blackboard. It's under course documents.
Okay.
Okay, so, but you email when there's things like the extra credit, you email that to me. Or when we take a test, you email it to me. And then what happens, I'll grade your test later this week and I'll send you an email back with your grade. So you'll know what your score was on your test. Okay?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have a good week.
You too.
Thank you. Stacy, do you have a question? Yo, Stacy. Stacy. Okay, Stacy, I'm gonna stop recording.